Good day, everyone. My name is Anthony Mills. I'm the Executive Director of Global Innovation Institute, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, where we're hosting Mr. Alejandro Cremades. Just as a note, real quick, as you know, Global Innovation Institute is the world's leading professional certification, business accreditation, and membership organization in the field of innovation, offering a comprehensive certification program and business accreditation program and extensive member benefits, as well as a number of special services and resources available to everyone. And as part of what we do every month, we put on a webinar series featuring different speakers. So I just, again, want to welcome you to our webinar today, this day. So let me begin by introducing our guest today. Our guest today is Mr. Alejandro Cremades. Now, Alejandro is the founding partner of Panthera Advisors, a premier investment banking and financial consultancy based in New York City and California that has a focus on small to medium-sized businesses looking for M&A advisory and fundraising support. Alejandro is also a serial entrepreneur. He most recently co-founded OneVest, one of the largest online community platforms of entrepreneurs, which at the time of its acquisition boasted almost 500,000 registered entrepreneurs across 234 countries. Prior to OneVest, Alejandro was an attorney at King & Spalding, where he was involved in one of the largest investment arbitration cases in history, Chevron versus Ecuador, that was worth $113 billion at stake. Alejandro has been included in the top 30 under 30 of Vanity Fair, Entrepreneur Magazine, and GQ Magazine, and TechCrunch named Alejandro as one of the expats shaping New York City's tech scene. Alejandro is the best-selling author of The Art of Startup Fundraising, and more recently, Selling Your Startup, a founder's guide to getting their startup acquired. This book includes testimonials from over 20 entrepreneurs that have sold their company for over $500 million. Alejandro also contributes to Forbes. Alejandro guest lectures at New York University Stern School of Business and the Wharton Business School, and hosts the popular Deal Makers podcast, where successful entrepreneurs share how they sold their status. So today, Alejandro is going to be talking to us about his new book, Selling Your Startup. And in doing that, he's going to pull back the curtain for us and reveal a lot of really juicy details about things like how to get your startup acquired, the actual acquisition process, acquire expectations, why many acquisitions fails, and a number of other points in this area. So with that, please everyone welcome me join me in welcoming Alejandro Cremades to our webinar today. Alejandro, the floor is now yours.
Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for having me, also to the team and to the Global Innovation Institute. Definitely a pleasure to be with you all. And really the purpose of the session today is to really give you all, clear visibility and guidance into what the process is of really getting your company acquired, or how do you package and position a company for an exit, no? So in essence, I always like to start these presentations with a little quote, and I like this quote from Nelson Mandela, and that is that it always seems impossible until it's done. And I find that, that to be the case, when you're always thinking about transactions. I find that, ultimately with really understanding the process, really understanding the methodology, really knowing, especially how you combine strategy and psychology, in these types of transactions, it can definitely be done. And, I actually published the book, Selling Your Startup, right here, where basically what I do is I walk, people through how that journey or that process really is. And I'm just posting here the link so that everyone has it, right there on Zoom. Basically, like the main reason why I came up with this book was because on my last company, I did 4 acquisitions. There was 3 on the buy side, 1 on the sell side, where essentially we got acquired by a media corporation out of California. And what I kept coming up against was essentially that there was not a lot, in this topic. And people tend to focus a lot on raising capital when it comes to building and scaling hyper growth companies. but not as much when it comes to really the acquisition part of it. And I'm a big fan that when you are getting started, every beginning, needs to start with the end, really understanding what is the end, what is going to be that end goal, and really ultimately reverse back engineer the process to where you are today. And in essence, take immediate steps in order to get to where you want to be. And the main reason for this book is so that people can really understand what the end looks like and how they're able to position things today, because every single thing that you do today, whether it's accepting money, whether it's, building the team, whether it's, building the business, every decision that you make is going to impact how that finish line, how reaching that finish line, how that picture is going to be. So ultimately, that was the purpose of this book. Now, in essence, as well here, I want to talk about the funnel. So the funnel, the M&A funnel, really, when you're getting in front of acquirers, potential targets, and we're going to be talking about that, building that list of targets in just a little bit. But everything starts with the screening. That is the moment where, you get into their radar, where they are going to start to socialize with you, where they're going to be bringing other advisors or perhaps other team members or other departments to take a look at what you're doing and to see what are the clear synergies in between you guys. And then the other thing that is going to happen is, ideally, you're going to get to the LOI, and then the LOI, once you pick the one that you want, will lead into the diligence and the decision. Now, people think that diligence happens, right after you get the LOI, but the truth of the matter is that diligence happens the minute you walk in the door. And they're going to be right away in the first couple of minutes, they're going to know whether they want to pursue a transaction or not. So that's why you want to be completely bottom up, and you want to have that narrative of the why, the what, and the how very clear, so that in 2 to 3 minutes, you're able to leave them moved, touched, and inspired. In essence, as well, everything is all about the story. Storytelling is absolutely everything. And especially when you are really on the earlier stages, of building a company. So there's going to be two types ultimately of acquisitions. You're going to have the strategic acquisition, and you're going to have also the financial acquisition. On the strategic acquisition, typically you're going after companies, where there's like a really good synergy, where they're really betting on acquiring you, on bringing you in under their umbrella, and obviously, with their distribution and all of that stuff, that will be beneficial for you and beneficial for them. And then you have also the financial acquisition, which typically is going to be more like private equity firms and so forth. And in essence, typically what you're seeing there is that it's going to be 5 million plus. So anything up to 5 million is going to be more on the strategic, kind of aspect. And when you're hitting that 5 million, then you're getting a broader range of potential players that you can go after, because now you have not only the strategic side of it, but then also the financial side of it. But in any case, when you are going after, these acquirers, when you're engaging with them, ultimately, what separates the people that fail on the deals from the people that really succeed is storytelling. I mean, ultimately, they're betting on you, they're betting on the team as well, and they're betting on what's possible. And that is strategic roadmap that they have that blends really nice with yours. So this is really, in essence, why you want to have a solid pitch. You want to really understand how you're packaging the story, how you have your numbers as well that tell the story for them so that they can model things out as well on their end. And that's going to be part of really building something compelling that they're going to be really attracted by. The other thing is that when you're going after a strategic acquirers, too, ultimately, it's going to be, price is not going to become an issue. They're going to want you at all stakes, especially if they've already submitted, the potential of doing a deal to their board, then their butt is going to be on the line. So essentially, they really want to get this deal done. So when you're able to get a bunch of strategics to give you an LOI, then that competitive process really, arrives, where ultimately price, can really shoot up the roof. Now, here, if we continue, there's great, ways, or great inspiration that you can find when it comes to storytelling. I really like, Steve Jobs back in 2007 when he presented the iPhone, where he uses words like revolutionary, extraordinary, the first time, stuff like that, is something that really captivates people, because at the end of the day, it's is the facts are always going to be the facts, but the way that you deliver them is ultimately what matters. So for example, in this case, Steve Jobs could be selling you a pen. He would make it look beautiful. So it's all about that wrapper that you're putting as to whatever you're saying, no? Then I really like as well, the video of Elon Musk, when he presented the Tesla Powerwall, because when you are in front of those potential targets, in front of those potential acquirers, you also want to be sounding authentic. You want to be, not sounding like a robot when you're just like throwing your spiel. You want to really sound as authentic. And in this sense, what Elon Musk did is, if you watch that video, which you can find on YouTube, he is always taking the temperature of the room. You could be one of those 3,000 people and he still feels like the guy is talking directly to you. And that is ultimately what you want to do when you're delivering your pitch, to any of those acquirers that are interested in the business. You want to be there with them. You really want to be able to hear and use a special kind of listening. It's not the listening for looking good or the listening for giving the right answer. When it comes down to really getting deals done, it's all about listening for identifying the concerns that are in between you and the money, because those are people that they have their own roadmap. They've probably spoken to other competitors of yours, direct or indirect. And what is forbidding them from really getting a deal done is the concerns in between. So you need to employ that kind of listening that is going to allow you to really identify what's in between you and the money. Let me put you a good example of what listening at its best looks like. There is a Bob Iger. So he was the CEO of Walt Disney, arguably one of the best CEOs of all time. And on one of his of the chapters of his latest book, which is called The Ride of a Lifetime, great book, he talks about that time where him and the board of directors received a lawsuit by one of the grandchilds of Walt Disney, the founder. I mean, obviously, imagine, in the US, the gossipness, the chit chat, the personal shit show. I mean, the media loves that kind of stuff. So what he did is, instead of sending his litigation team, and really putting more fuel to the fire, he called this guy directly, the grandchild of Walt Disney. He took him for lunch. And out of being at lunch, what he got was that the main reason for him bringing up the lawsuit was not the fact that he was, fraudulently appointed by the board of directors as the CEO of Disney. The main driver was the fact that this guy, the grandchild of Walt Disney, was never up to the expectations of his own family. And where he was present to that, and this is by listening for concerns, he essentially gave him emeritus role to the board of directors of Disney, which is no voice, no vote, no nothing. He also gave him an invitation to all the premiere events of Disney, of all these movies that they were launching. And as a result of that, the grandchild of Walt Disney, removed the lawsuit, dropped the lawsuit. And this is what listening at its best looks like. This is the type of listening that you want to really implement when you're doing deal making, whether it's pursuing an acquisition or pursuing raising financing. It's all about the concerns that are in between you and the money. And I think that one thing that you want to look at, and also one thing that you want to do, whether you're looking at doing an acquisition or whether you're looking at doing a raise of capital, is that you should avoid focusing on the money. You need to focus on getting to the next meeting, because by getting to the next meeting, you're going to be able to address more concerns. And when there's no concerns, guess what's happening? The deal is closed. So that's where you always need to put the focus at. Now, let's talk about fundraising versus acquisitions. So on fundraising, it's very interesting, because when you're dealing with investors, and I obviously go into detail on this on my first book, actually, called The Art of Startup Fundraising. I see a lot of people joining us from the Middle East. The Art of Startup Fundraising is coming out this month, funny enough, in Arabic. It's going to be published by Jamal, the publisher there. So feel free to take a look. And I think that there's also going to be a chapter there that talks about the trends of fundraising in the Middle East, which I think that you will very much enjoy. But fundraising, in essence, is all about having everything figured out. You have everything figured out, all the questions that investors are asking you, you have them all in place, you have them all in mind. But, it's interesting how, for example, on acquisitions, is completely different, because it's all about, it's not your idea. is the idea of whoever is acquiring you. So you have, in essence, everything completely unfigured out, which is amazing. So, the way that you're positioning things, you need to allow people to dream. You need to allow people to think what it would look like when they're bringing, what you're doing under their umbrella that they have created under whatever strategic roadmap that they want to execute on. And that's something that you really want to be familiar with, especially when you're having those introductory meetings. Try to get as much access as possible or insights into what that strategic roadmap looks like, so that you're able to understand how you can blend this into that future that they're trying to create. Because again, it's not your idea, it's their idea. That's why they are acquiring your company. Now, let's talk about the acquisition memorandum, because typically when you go out, when you want to put together a really proper M&A process to get your company acquired, you want to have an acquisition memorandum. This is going to be essentially what you're going to be distributing with the potential acquirers, with the people that are going to have an interest. And in essence, the acquisition memorandum is going to be, a breakdown of the following that you see here. So you're going to have the legal disclosures. You're going to have an executive summary, basically putting the 30,000-foot view, the opportunity, and also where you are involved in that, the solution ultimately that you're bringing to market and who you're targeting with this, how big this is, how big is growing. So obviously you want to talk about the market size, the compounding annual growth rate, all of that good stuff. Who are you competing against? And also, what are the advantages that you have, as well as what you've already done? What kind of traction, accomplishments, milestones, financials, critical, team, marketing, business history, reasons for sale, and then also the directions for submitting an LOI. Now, there is one thing that is very interesting here, and it has to do, more with the fundraising side of it, but I think that it can also be implemented to the acquisition side. And there was a study that followed the way that investors engage with 300 pitch decks. And out of that, study, and I think that this can also be implemented on acquisitions, what it came out was that on the results, on average, they would only spend reviewing those presentations about 2 minutes and 41 seconds, which is almost nothing. The number one piece of information that they would look at would be the financials, where they would allocate on average 23 seconds, and then the rest will be, team, competition. But team, you see there 22 seconds, right? But financials is super critical. They're going to be able to see where you're coming from and where you're heading, and then also how grounded you are with the numbers, which is essential. Then the other thing is going to be the team. Obviously, when you're doing an acquisition, they're going to be very interested on retaining you. So there's going to be what I call in a fun way, the vesting and resting, which essentially is going to be typically those vesting and restings are going to be like 2 to 3 years. And you need to stay 2 to 3 years so that you can fully realize all the amount that is part of the transaction. Typically, they're going to give you some on the front end, as upfront, type of cash or stock. And then it's going to be more on the back end, that is going to be based on the earnouts, based on you staying on board, involved with the business and things of that nature. No, but here you see essentially the breakdown of where the attention is going to go when they're reviewing your presentation. Then, when we're thinking about the timeline, the timeline is obviously one of the most important slides that we're going to be talking and discussing and showing, here on the presentation today. But in essence, is going to look something like this. Typically on those acquisitions, those transactions, they're going to be anywhere between 6 to 8 months, on average, give or take. And everything is going to start, obviously with the outreach. Before you do the outreach, you're going to be building a list of targets. So we're going to be talking about that in just a few slides down. But once you have those targets, give or take, you're going to have anywhere between 100 to 500 targets. Then you're going to go into the outreach mode. On the outreach mode, you're gonna go out to them, and I'm going to share with you just how that's going to work. Then once you establish that first touch point, with that company, by the way, typically those outreach, you're gonna have, investment bankers, people like, for example, us, what we do with Pantera Advisors, that they reach out, in an anonymous way to see if there's a fit, to see, if they could be in it for the right reasons. But once you have that first touch point, then they're going to ask you for some additional information. In this case, the acquisition memorandum, which you're going to be sharing. At this point, if there is interest, then you may bring, and we would bring the founders or the management team of the company for an introductory meeting. That introductory meeting is going to be very high level. They're going to be telling you about their business. You're going to be telling you about what you're doing so that they get that flavor. Then there's going to be some Q&A. And then basically after this, what you need to make sure is that there's always a call to action. Every interaction needs to finish with a call to action. Just like as I was saying earlier, that you need to always focus on the meeting, getting to the next meeting. Again, every interaction needs to finish with a call to action, whether it's a meeting or whether it's an email. You need to always try to shoot for getting something on the calendar. So for example, if you have the introductory meeting and you're not sure as to what are going to be the next steps, they haven't told you like, hey, let's reconvene next week on this day, or let me take a look, let me discuss with my partners. And then, like perhaps on Tuesday or Wednesday, just having a clear understanding of what's going to be the next step, you need to ask, hey, what would you suggest in terms of next steps, right? Now, after the introductory meeting, you need to follow up. You need to follow up with a thank you email. On that thank you email, you're going to be putting whatever additional information they have requested, and then also obviously attaching the acquisition memorandum and other information. Now, on the acquisition memorandum, that you see here that you're going to be sharing as part of the materials on phase 2, you don't know, you really don't have an idea as to, perhaps what's their motivation, what's their driver, if they have integrity, if they don't have integrity. So probably you want to filter them out more on phase 3. So on phase 2, whatever materials that you're sharing, remove whatever sensitive information that you have so that eventually you're able to control that secret sauce that you may have, and that you really, get to understand whether it makes sense to send that after you've had your introductory meeting. Then let's say, after the introductory meeting, let's say, you're scheduling, a meeting for next week, for the following week. They're going to arrive already prepared. You've already sent them, all the materials after, on that thank you email after that phase 3 meeting. And on phase 4, what's going to happen is they're going to come really prepared. They're going to come with a lot of questions. They're going to probably bring other members of the team. And then really after this meeting, what's going to happen is that either they're going to give you a clear understanding of what's going to be the next step, or what's going to happen is they're going to tell you, hey, let's say bounce this around with the team members and then we'll revert back. Probably they're going to have to present it to the board and things of that nature. So what you want to do is you want to go into what is called a follow-up strategy. On the follow-up strategy, you want to talk about, perhaps milestones, progress. You want to share some really exciting stuff. So that really gets them, like going and really excited about getting that deal done. Then eventually what you want to do is you want to push it all the way to an LOI. The letter of intent ultimately is the document that summarizes the terms on how the deal could be structured. So the LOI is not binding. Now on the LOI, it could be binding for you as the seller because essentially there's going to be an exclusivity period, typically 60 to 90 days, where it's going to be mandatory for you to not be able to shop this around. But for them, they can drop out, whenever they want of the deal and not have to consume the deal. So that's tricky. So whenever you're choosing an LOI, you got to make sure that you're choosing the LOI for someone that is committed to getting the deal done. I can't tell you how many times, you just have curiosity, type of stuff involved. They want to do the full-blown due diligence, get to know your business inside and out, and then God knows what they want to do with that. So whenever you're choosing an LOI, you need to see that there's a clear fit, not only on the business side of things, but then also on the people side of things. So my take also, is that you always want to push as many LOIs as possible, to phase 6. So then you're able to choose, and then perhaps you can get them, to compete against one another to really increase, the end price that you're going to be getting, as part of the transaction. Now, the next part is going to be, phase 7, which is the legal documentation and how you're drafting that up with the lawyers. Now, after the LOIs, they're going to be bringing, and you choose one, they're going to be bringing their legal team. You're going to be bringing your own legal team too, to perhaps, draft that asset purchase agreement. But here you got to be very careful because lawyers, they're going to go on their own ends, for them, it's not in their best interest to get the deal done because once the deal gets done, they don't charge any more money, no more hours, to be charged. So you need to make sure that you're keeping everyone, in line, in motion, that they're not like over negotiating on stupid stuff, on stupid language. And there's going to be many instances where, for example, we see this with the companies that we get to work with where we may tell the founder or the CEO, hey, it's time for you to pick up the phone and call directly the CEO of the other company so that we can untangle this. Because lawyers, when there's so many people involved, it can really get tangled very quickly. So you always need to be there to really untangle things, to continue to talk about the excitement, the vision, and all of that stuff, and then, keep pushing things forward. Then after the legal documentation, then obviously, once as well the full due diligence has been passed and met, then obviously you are going to head into the closing. And in essence, then, once the closing is done, everything, the transaction is closed, documents are signed, cash or stock, whatever is transferred, and, everyone is celebrating. Now, in terms of, the next part of the process here is going to be all about the outreach. How do you really build that list of prospects? How do you know who you're going to go after, when it comes to the acquisition? And you need to know that timing is everything, because you need to always push for urgency. Urgency is critical when you're looking at getting a deal done, because if you've spoken with someone and then, you go back to that someone a few months later, they're going to think that everyone else rejected you. So you need to really coordinate everyone and have everyone at the same time, pushing them all in parallel towards that LOI. You can't afford to have people that you're going to go back or stuff like that. You need to streamline this as much as you can. Now, in essence, you're going to find, that when you put together a list, people, if it's not, it depends on how targeted it is, but, it could be like 100 no's for one yes. But all you need is one yes at the end of the day for getting a deal done. When it comes to the CRM, you're going to be building a CRM. You can put this, on whatever tool that you're using, or for example, like even on a Google sheet that you can create. You're going to be using different tools to really understand who are going to be people that you're going to go after. So this could be Crunchbase, PitchBook. You can even use LinkedIn, go to events, things like that to really identify who are going to be those potential prospects that you're going to go after. And then when it comes to really you having that list in place and really knowing how you're going to be tapping into it and how you're going to be opening those doors, you always, my personal suggestion and recommendation is that you remove yourself and that you allow an investment banker, let's say someone like us, to really take care of that outreach and those introductions, because ultimately you want the least amount of people as possible to know that you are in an M&A process. So basically, if you have someone doing that initial filtering for you, where you are essentially anonymous, when there is, some of these people that are coming forward with interest, that investment banker can really filter them, see who is in it for the right reasons, and then share the documentation and really start to structure those meetings. So for example, out of, let's say, 200 or 300 targets, you may end up speaking with 20 or 30. The last thing that you want is for the 200 or 300 to know that right now you're running an M&A process. You want the least amount of people to know as possible. Now, you could get introductions done via the network too, via networking events. They could call, email, for example, these bankers, but I think it's better to use relationships and obviously, being on the press and stuff like that so that you can generate inbound. I think that inbound is typically, much better than outbound. And in many cases, you see how inbound really triggers a process. So that could be, you're on the press, you're doing great stuff. Eventually, people are going to come knocking, whether it's private equity firms or other bigger firms. And what you want to do is, once that happens, you want to bring very quickly, an investment banker so that they can help you on the process, so that they can create that competitive bidding and get other people to come to the table as well. Now, when it comes to, in essence, the introductions, you're going to be getting them as well from advisors, from consultants, from former employees, from existing investors. Those are people that can also open other doors, by the way. But typically, the way that you always want to enter, those companies that you're going after is via the CEO of the business. And the reason for this is because, for example, in corporate America, nobody gets fired for saying no. It's just the way it is. So when you're going, in and you're entering a company to see if there is interest via their business development department or their corporate development department, there's very high chances of them to just not even allocate time to you. Why? Because they're going to be, afraid, or they're going to have fear on how they're going to be looked at or viewed by other peers in the business for entertaining, the opportunity. So what you always want to do is you want to go by the top person, by the CEO. The CEO is going to shoot you down to the corp dev or to the business development people. And obviously, they're going to know that it's coming via the CEO. So they're going to allocate the time that it requires to really analyze your opportunity. And then from there, they will push you back up to the CEO and then to the board for approval. But that's the way that you always want to go about it so that you can increase your chances of getting the deal done. Now, in terms of the way that the deal is going to be structured, you're going to have it in two different formats. You're going to have either stock or you're going to have either cash. But you got to be very careful with stock and really understand the value that they're putting into this, because we've seen crazy stories, right? So for example, take a look at what happened with WeWork. So WeWork was on its way to an IPO. They were killing it, crazy valuation. I think it was like something like 50 or 60 billion or something crazy like that. And basically, what happened is that the press started, digging into it, a bunch of investigative reports, and they found stuff that was not very appealing, towards the public market. So they had to pull out from the IPO process. They didn't really have a lot of stock, a lot of cash in hand. So then essentially what happened is that, they ended up doing a bunch of down rounds and people got burned left and right. Now, that was problematic, essentially, and a big time problem for those companies that sold themselves in stock, because they sold their companies for stock for a crazy valuation that right now is not even 1/10 of what it used to be. So you need to be very careful when you're looking at doing a stock type of transaction. Cash is always the best. You want to have cash, always upfront. And, you're going to have combinations too of stock and cash. You're going to have also on those transactions the earnouts. Now, the earnouts, you got to be careful with them because they're going to be always put in a way that is going to be very hard to achieve them. And they're going to be put, towards, let's say, 12 to 24 months. So earnouts, you should not count on them that much because most of the time you're not going to be able to fully realize them. You could realize 25, 50%, but realizing 100% of an earnout is going to be very, very difficult. So be careful as to how you structure that. On the diligence side of it, one thing that you're going to be encountering there is that you're going to have people that are really going to be focusing on the, essentially the team, the business, as well as the technology, perhaps like the secret sauce, as you see here. Now, on the team, you need to be careful with talking over each other, correcting each other. On the business, you got to have people that are going to be helping, perhaps references that you can provide. And on the technology, maybe on that secret sauce, they're going to be bringing advisors where they want to take a look at, if you're a technology company, for example, the code or whatever that is. And if you're more like an offline company, whatever that secret sauce is, they're going to be coming with advisors at the end of the day. There is, actually, an article that I published not long ago that basically I cover, how you put together a diligence room. So I'm just going to be pasting it here for everyone to see. Basically that due diligence process, you need to have, everything put, as you can see, on that article that I published not long ago. You need to have everything into folders, and then you need to divide that into subfolders. Typically, it really depends, on what stage you're at, in the game. But in essence, like when you're looking at putting your diligence folder together, you are going to have, to use, perhaps more of a secure type of system, maybe like an intralinks or something of that nature. Maybe like the Google Drive or the Dropbox could work. But if it's going to be a larger acquisition, you're going to have to put your documentation and your stuff into more of an organized type of way. So if you go down on this article, you're going to be able to see your due diligence checklist, and there you're going to be able to see point by point how you can structure your own diligence room. Now, in terms of the next thing, that I have here to cover, is what to look for buyers, because they are doing due diligence on you. So you want to also do due diligence on them. You want to take a look at what kind of integrity do they have. Maybe speak with other people, that they've acquired in the past. Ask for some introductions to see how they behaved. Obviously, if they're coming with, and I've seen this a lot, where you agree on certain terms on the LOI, and then when it comes to really bringing, the actual, asset purchase agreement, and they're coming with all types of crazy terms, you got to be very careful there if that was not part of the LOI, because if they're behaving like that, especially if you're doing a stock deal or if there's earnouts in place, most likely they're going to be pirates, too, on that, and they're going to be putting you in a really difficult spot. So integrity is a really big one. Network is another one, especially if you need to do that vesting, type of timeline. You're going to be in that company for 2 to 3 years. I've seen it many, many times when, especially on my podcast, on the Deal Makers podcast, which essentially you can, by the way, see it here. You're going to find that, there's going to be, a lot of founders that when they're repeated founders, they go at it again. And it's all about building the network. So, for example, when you go to a company like Google or to a company like Microsoft, they have like insane talent. And you know that you're going to be meeting very interesting people there that could serve as your co-founders for your next business. So that network and that ecosystem that they have around them is going to be essential. So take a look at that. And again, on that link, you can see some of those other episodes. Then the speed, is critical. You always want to push it. When you're on the diligence side or when you've accepted an LOI from a potential buyer, you want to have week to week, so weekly meetings, so that momentum is not lost and at all times where you're at. But that is pretty much for that. Now, in terms of why you need investment bankers, really quickly, is for guidance. You want to have the good cop, the bad cop, and better terms, because when it comes to discussing essentially the terms of the deal, you want to remove yourself. You don't want to be part of the numbers, type of talk. You want to be there where you're talking about the vision, how great you guys are going to be able to blend together. So leave the negotiation and the numbers talk for someone that is an expert. So that's basically what I had to cover, with you all today. And obviously happy to answer any questions. And here is my email if you guys want to reach out. So Anthony, maybe we open it up to the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have questions, you can either type them into the chat window here that you see, or you can just unmute yourself and chime in and let us know what questions you have. And we'll field any questions of Alejandro, field any questions you might have. There's one question here, and Alejandro, if you see the chat window or not.
I see it right now. So from Nicholas. So basically, his question is, do you call it the acquisition memorandum or the information memo? I mean, there's all types of ways to really label this. I like it the acquisition memorandum, to be honest with you, but there's all types to really label this. There's like 4, 5, or 6 different names, but ultimately to me, it's still the acquisition memorandum, no? Ultimately, what this document is all about is showing those potential targets or those potential buyers what's the story of the business, how you're breaking it down, and why it should matter to them. No, and I find that the way that the work that you're going to be doing, on the number side of it, and how you are displaying those numbers, I think that you should do that with beautiful charts, not just by getting screenshots, beautiful charts, so that they can digest very easily, what are the historicals and where you're heading as well with the business.
Great.
So I think we have here another question from Laura. So do investors flip businesses like they flip properties? I feel like I could have a skill set in helping companies find their strategic fit for an acquisition and considering ways for how to leverage it. It's a very interesting question, Laura. Like now what you're seeing as well is these people that call themselves acquisition entrepreneurs. It's people that basically are heading into, rather than building the pipes, what they're experts more in managing and ramping up. So they're more experts in getting the flow, the water flow through those pipes. So what they would do is they would get maybe like a business, and they were acquired, a business that is doing anywhere between 2 to 5 million in revenue, and perhaps acquire that so that they're not starting from scratch, and that's going to help them with that. Now, in terms of investors, let's see here what you're asking about investors. I mean, investors, they always, when they invest in a company, they invest in a company with the expectations of getting returns and money back. So when people are thinking about raising money, they need to be thinking about not money in, but really money out, and money out with returns. So when you are raising money, you always need to be thinking about how you're going to be giving it back with returns. Now, the fact that you have skill sets, on that, and finding, for example, acquirers and stuff like that, I think that could be great. But again, the process is very difficult. So I think that you want to have people that have had a lot of experience in really packaging things together and really following a proper process. Now, let's see here. The next question from Manuel. How crazy should you be with your future financials? Everyone, let me see here. Everyone wants to see a hockey stick, but everyone also knows that's unrealistic. Manuel, I think that, on fundraising, you can get a little bit more excited and optimistic. I think that when you're thinking about the financials for an acquisition, you got to be extremely conservative, because remember that how those model out and how those play out are going to impact directly your earnout. If you have an earnout, for example, on the back end on the transaction, if you're not meeting your numbers, then that's going to be a problem, because you're not going to be able to realize your money. So always when you're entering, those type of transactions, you need to have numbers that are realistic, numbers that make sense, and numbers that you think that you're going to be able to achieve. The next question from Mohammed. How can you manage investment rounds? Say we got the founding investors at a value and then next round kicks in. What would be the most appealing KPIs to show to attract second and third rounds? Look, I think, Mohammed, that every round is going to be different. The way that you should think about money is not about money. It's about networks. It's about who is giving you the money, because every 18 to 24 months, the company is going to mature. So you're going to go first from seed, which is going to be more people investing in you, more people investing in the strategic roadmap in the team. This is going to be angels. This is going to be angel groups, super angels, family offices. 18 to 24 months, you're going to mature and you're going to graduate to what is called the Series A. At the Series A level, at this point, you have product market fit, you have validation, and you're going after, you're going to go after venture capital firms. So on the seed round, you're mainly going after people that can add value with internal processes, with perhaps access to talent. But on the Series A, where you're getting those venture capital firms, you want to have access to business development deals, partnerships. You want to have access to talent, then being able to recruit people from their network to bring them a senior leadership to your business. On seed rounds, you're going to go anywhere between 250,000 all the way up to 5 million. On Series A's, it's going to be anywhere between $5 to $15 million in injected capital. At a Series A, people are going to be expecting that at least you have 1 million plus in revenue. And then 18 to 24 months, you're going to mature and graduate to a Series B. At a Series B level, product market fit is flying off the roof. So what you're looking at doing here is you're looking at getting investors that can give you growth money. And here you're graduating as well and transitioning from early stage to a growth stage company. At a Series B, what those investors are looking to do is grabbing whatever you're doing already great and replicating it and launching it into a different geographic location. And that is what you do in essence on a Series B. And then after a Series B, you continue to do more of the same towards a liquidity event. And that is raising more money 18 to 24 months so that you can get closer to that liquidity event, which is in the form of an IPO, an acquisition like we're talking today, in stock or in cash, or a secondary sale where newer investors are buying out existing investors in that business. So that's exactly the way that you want to manage expectations and how things are going to be going in terms of KPIs and so forth. Now, the next question is from Hafizullah, and Hafizullah mentions here, let me see. You mentioned 100 to 200 potential buyers, but this must also depend on business we are in. How we get the right number of potentials? So look, I think that it's all in the research that you do and all about how you're finding, who is doing what, because right now we live in a world that is very small, very transparent. So when you use tools like Crunchbase or PitchBook, you're going to be able to see who is in your segment, who is in your space, who is in your industry. And what you want to do is carefully craft that list, which you can do with the expert of an advisor, like, for example, us, where essentially, we identify who are going to be the people with most interest based on synergies and based on potential outcome. Now, as you well said, it's going to vary from company to company. Some companies may only have like 40 or 50 buyers, especially the bigger that you get. For example, the smaller the amount of potential acquirers that you're going to have. So the bigger that you get, obviously, when you're going past 100 million, there's only in valuation, there's only a small amount of people that can acquire your business. And the higher that you go, this even smaller that the list goes. And when you're under 100 million, obviously, the smaller that you get or the smaller that you are, the bigger, that list of people that you're going to go after. So again, it really all comes down to what's your size, what is your segment, and that is going to vary really who you're going to go after. Now, the next question is from Nicholas. Could you perhaps talk about a bit more about the period and timing where you are talking about to multiple companies? You said you can have multiple LOIs out there, but then at some point you go exclusive with one company, or you can have multiple companies doing due diligence at one time over 90 days. Yeah, so you can't really do that because in many instances, you're going to see how the potential buyer may be investing resources. So, for example, they may want to bring a firm like a Deloitte or PwC or something like that to really take a deeper dive into everything. That costs, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And obviously, what they don't want to do is go exclusive with you, knowing that there's another player, and for them to potentially lose that money. So what you want to do here is, before you get to that LOI, you want to get to know them. You want to really see the synergies. And then when you have all the LOIs on the table, you need to pick whoever you think is going to be very highly likely to really get the deal done, and where you're going to be, the most happy with you, yourself, the team, and also the investors with the potential deal and structure that you're going to be getting. So hopefully, that provided some background there, but at the end of the day, the exclusivity is going to be 60 to 90 days. At that point, you cannot shop it around. And if the investor, if the acquirer drops off, then that's going to be a massive problem for you, because then you're going to have to go out to the other ones and tell them that, hey, let's resume the conversation. And that's not going to look good. They're going to think that something, they found on the due diligence, it's negative signal, and you got to be very careful when you're sending negative signaling. So again, once you're choosing one of those LOIs that you've received and you're ready to go in exclusive mode with them for 60 or 90 days to get that deal done, you need to be clear and you need to have visibility into the fact that that potential buyer are going to be highly likely to go all the way to the finish line with you. Now, the next question is, let's see here. I think that we covered most of those questions, Anthony.
Yeah, there's one here about, do you have access to the APAC markets, Asia Pacific?
Yeah, we have a bunch of deals, that we're doing there. So as, for example, on Pantera, we have right now 60% of our clients in the US and 40% they're all over the world. So we have a very much a global aspect, or a global view. One of the things that we've seen, for example, there is that typically, especially in Asia, you have those buyers where they love, for example, like American companies, and the prices that they're willing to put on the table are like ridiculous, are like super high. So, I think that if you have access, or if you have synergies, or if you've built partnerships, with companies in that region, I think that it makes sense to really get them, as part of the M&A process as well, to really get a really good outcome.
Very good. Going back to this whole thing about the letter of intent, because this is a fascinating topic. That I assume before you accept the letter of intent, as the company seeking investment or to be acquired, you're going to do your own due diligence. Is there a way to flesh out the reputation of a potential acquirer to make sure the one we accept the letter of intent with, they have a good reputation and they're not ones to walk away from that? How do we do that due diligence on our side?
I think that you need to, for example, if they've done a bunch of acquisitions, ask them to make an introduction to someone that they've acquired in the past, so that you can really get an idea as to what was their experience with them. I think that that's a good way to do that. Obviously you want to do some research. You want to see how active they are too, because if they're not really active and they do an acquisition from a big period of time to a big period of time, or is their first acquisition, that it's going to be highly unlikely that they would get it done. And also get it done in a timely fashion. Mm-hmm. So, what you want to do is go with people that have an assembly line, kind of already determined. Right. And I think that you can really do this, due diligence by not only asking them, questions that could help, in that department, but asking them for introductions to people that have already done deals with them. And they would offer, that, as well as part of that getting to know each other kind of process.
So can you generalize that and say the more deal flow they have going on, the safer they are to work with?
100%. When you're, for example, looking at making a deal with someone like Google, they have an assembly line that you would not even believe, because Most of these transactions also unfortunately they fail. I mean, 90% of transactions, of acquisitions fail. And the reason why they fail is because on the integration, part of it. I think that, you need to also have, some type of an insight too, as to what that post-acquisition is going to look like too, because that may give you, some insights and visibility as to what that process would look like with them too. So I think that you want to kind of like get ahead of your skis, in this regard, and get an idea as to how, they think about integration, who are going to be the teams involved, what's their process, is there going to be an investment committee, also involved. Typically, investment committees, they tend to reject a lot of those deals too. So you want to be able to really understand, your mindset should be on how can I de-risk, this potential buyer? How can I de-risk this process so that I can increase the potential chances of getting this done?
To that end, would you ask them for a post-acquisition plan? What's, a specific plan for integration?
I mean, I think that you can ask them, as to how they would view the integration. I think that you could ask them as to how they see, that integration evolving, unfolding, who are going to be the teams that you're going to be working with. If you guys were to get a deal done, where does this fit, on their strategic roadmap? So that kind of stuff, absolutely.
Yeah, because some acquisitions are about the business and some are about the people, the acquire. Like when Walmart bought Jet.com, it was largely, to some extent, about the individual running Jet.com, and
Right.
and what value that individual comes. So that roadmap for integration may look different depending on if it's more about the team or more about the business.
I mean, I honestly think, Anthony, that that ultimately, it's all about making sure that expectations are aligned. And you need to have your expectations aligned with their expectations. Because the problem that I see is that in many of those transactions, especially when you're having those meetings and those discussions, people tend to overpromise too much and then underdeliver. So you want to make sure that whatever expectations are on both ends are really coming and they're blending nicely together. No?
Yeah, that makes perfectly good sense. That's right. It's just kind of like we talk about inside a corporate, and there's a lot of stakeholder management and stakeholder expectations you have to work with. So certainly managing the expectations on both sides makes sense. So I have one last question, and maybe we'll wrap it up with this. And it kind of goes back a little bit in the process. And it has to do with when they're pitching the business to acquirers, and we're talking about competition. Now, inside of a corporate, when we're pitching new ideas, a lot of times the idea of competition isn't about direct competition. It's about competing with non-competition or what, competing for people's time or competing for people's money, what other things we compete with. But I would guess that once we start to get toward, through series A and B and C, and we're toward more acquisition phase, it really is about who our direct competitors is. Is that correct? Do you understand my question?
So in terms of so being attractive enough, more attractive than the other players, correct? And how you position.
Well, yeah, and new ideas inside of corporates, it's like, we have a new idea for something, for a new offering, but it's competing for people's time and money, and it may not be, from even a direct competitor. We're competing, especially if it's a new product category, for example. I introduce something that's, involves a new hobby or something you can do. Now I'm competing against other hobbies, I'll give you an example. So I worked for Whirlpool Corporation at one point, and we introduced a new product line that had to do with home brewing of beer. And it targeted certain people who are interested in home brewing, and it's actually competing against people spending their time doing other things like reading or gardening and so forth. So you're competing against what we call non-competition. This is very different than direct competition. So if you get a sense for that, but I think in the case of what we're talking about here, by the time you get to that acquisition space, the competition we're dealing with is direct competitors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, look, I think that so you're always going to be competing against direct competitors, whether it is, for getting a deal done, whether that is for, raising money, especially on the acquisition side, you're going to be engaging with direct competitors, that are bigger than you, that want to acquire your business. You're going to be competing with other direct competitors that perhaps are competing to get a deal done with them, as well. that they're looking to acquire someone and they don't know who they're going to be picking, because it's all about picking winners at the end of the day. And you see that a lot on fundraising, for example, where investors, would, for example, define well what an investment thesis may look like for deploying capital from their funds. And then all of a sudden, what they need to do is they need to survey the market. So they're going to be basically speaking with every single company in their mother that is competing directly or indirectly against yours. And that's why you got to be very careful as to how you're approaching those, and making sure, as I outlined on the process, that I shared on my previous slide, that you're essentially, going at it when you're going full blown due diligence, and you're opening the kimono, people that essentially, are going to be, in it for the right reasons.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's very good. All right, one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. Anywhere in this process, do the parties execute a non-disclosure agreement?
Yeah, so you got to be careful with NDAs, because NDAs, what you want to do, I always look at those transactions, whether it's acquisitions or fundraising, as a sales process. Right. It's a sales process. And on a sales process, you always want to have the funnel as streamlined as possible. The problem is you do not want to create friction that is unnecessary and have bottlenecks in there, because it's very easy for people to just turn around and say no, especially, when you're dealing with bigger corporations where, you put an NDA in front of their eyes, and then they need to have, a bunch of departments to approve that NDA. And there's all types of language and back and forth, just to have a look and know if this is going to be of interest to them. My point of viewing this as a former lawyer is that NDAs are always subject to interpretation. Personally, I find them a waste of time. I think that, you should, always consult with your corporate counsel. But I find that, if you are, if I was, on the acquire, on the person that is going through the M&A process on their shoes, what I would personally do is, I would at the beginning, where you are like sharing the acquisition memo and all of that stuff, I would avoid, really throwing an NDA, slapping them with an NDA. And then perhaps, once they give you the LOI, they're interested and they want to do something, then at that point, you really hit them with an NDA, because they're already quite pregnant. They already want this. Yeah. So, at that point, you're creating that friction, but for them, it doesn't matter because they want it anyways.
Right. So yeah, later on, because at that point, they're going to dive deep and you're going to reveal more information. So later on in the cycle, maybe the NDA makes sense, but certainly not up front in the process.
Absolutely. I think that right when you're connecting and they say, oh, can you share something? And you say, yes, but please sign this NDA. They're probably not going to even respond to it.
Yeah, I know, like, early stage angels and VCs, that's a deal killer right away, just to have the NDA. So
100%.
All right, well, I think that brings us to the top of the hour and the completion of our time. And this has been an excellent conversation and discussion with a lot of great questions and a great presentation. So with that, I really just want to express our appreciation, Alejandro, for your time and your insight. And thank you for this today. We appreciate having you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And thank you so much, everyone. It has been an honor.
All right. Take care, everyone.